John Turturro, you play defense attorney John Stone in the HBO miniseries The Night Of, which aired this past summer. This was an unusual circumstance, because of course, when this miniseries was first conceived, James Gandolfini was a producer and playing the role of John Stone, but of course he passed away before he could film the entirety of the series. And then Robert De Niro was attached at one point to play the role. So how did this opportunity finally come to you to play it?
Well, I mean, first of all, I was very good friends with James for a long time. I directed him, and he was the lead in my film Romance and Cigarettes, and I worked with him, for a couple of years on that, and I know him since the early 1990s. So when they finally, I guess my agent had heard that they were looking for someone. I guess De Niro was talking about doing it, but I don't think they could work that out. And then when she knew that they were looking for someone, I guess many people were suggested, but Steve Zalian and I, he likes my work and I like him, and Steve and I had discussed me appearing in his first film, Searching for Bobby Fischer, which I really loved and which I couldn't do at the time. But and Richard Price I've worked with since the 80s. So I guess they really liked that idea. And then they responded to it really positively, and then they asked me to read the scripts. And at first I felt a little weird because I heard that James was attached, because he really was a good friend of mine. And I watched the pilot. It was much longer, and James worked basically one day. He only had worked one day, and he actually had no scenes with Riz. He just passed Riz on the street, but it was still strange to see, and he still was interesting and arresting, and but I don't think he really knew what he was going to do yet. He was just dipping his toe in. So then I said, okay. I still felt a little strange, but then I started reading the scripts, and then I asked them for all of them. When I read the whole thing, I loved the way it was written. It was written like a novel, and I thought it was was a great character in a beautifully written piece, and all the characters were tremendously complicated, and John Stone, maybe on the upper echelon of that. And then I talked to James's wife, and I felt better about that. And when you do it, you have to start from scratch, because James would have been. I think there was only 2 scripts when James passed away. There was a pilot and one other. So I basically read the whole thing, and started from the way I would normally start. And I didn't really have to erase something from my mind, because he hadn't really done that much yet. And you're also a very different person, so you have to make it your own. And I had a lot of time to prepare. I had about 4 months to prepare, and I took advantage of that in a big way. And it was wonderful to work with Steve and Richard and with Riz and Jeannie Berlin, who I loved, and Bill Camp and everyone else in it. So I think I think Steve did a fantastic job in the casting of it. It really feels like a real world. And I guess I'm like probably the most well-known person, in it. So it also makes you look more authentic too.
Yeah. You've done some work in TV before, but not very often in this kind of long-term 8-hour project. I mean, you did The Bronx is Burning back in 2007.
Right.
In this case, you got, as you mentioned, Steve Zalian, directing every episode of the series. It's sort of like
except one, right?
And so it's sort of in that sense more of like an 8-hour movie.
Yeah, it's like a 10-hour movie. Really, it's almost 10 hours. Yeah, it's like a novel. Well, what I liked about it was many times I've done adaptations of novels, and you're so disappointed because everything is reduced, and to the sometimes to the bare bones essence of it, and to the plot, and all the character elements all go out the window. And they don't usually make 3-hour movies nowadays that are serious movies, which they used to do occasionally. So it was nice to be able to have time to really, explore things, and also make sure that it wasn't repetitive too. But I just thought it was really, really well written. And what I liked a lot about it was that, at least for my character, he has this black humor, and people who work, in homicide division, a lot of times lawyers who are good defense lawyers, they have that. It's like survival mechanism. And what I thought was very interesting was, I thought they had written a character that had all the capabilities of being a terrific lawyer, but not the stomach to hold, not the constitution to hold a person's life in their hands. And I know lots of people who don't have the stomach for certain things, not just in that world, but in my own business, for example, really, really capable and talented people. And so I thought that was something that was very real and very truthful. And I just liked and also the relationship between him and Naz in the piece. And I think that Riz and I just hit it off. And I really, really like him a lot as a person. And I think that really helped us tremendously. We just hit it off. He's a really terrific rapper. I like his music.
What's interesting about The Night Of is that there are a lot of crime procedurals already on TV, tons of them. But this one I think is set apart by how detailed it is in terms of the day-to-day experience of the criminal justice system for both Nas and for John Stone and for everyone else involved in the case. And not just what we usually see as the dramatic, the arrests and the closing arguments and the speeches.
Right.
What did you think about that?
I mean, that's what life is. Life is all these details. It's all about the gray area. It's not about the black and white area, to get something done. And that's the more detail oriented you are, the more fascinating something can be. Because otherwise you solve it or you don't solve it. But there are people that I've talked to who've been on cases for 10 years, or longer, and they never solved the case. And it still bothers them. And they still live with that. And, there are people who've committed crimes who then fantasize that they didn't do it. They create an alternative reality. And the more you know about something, I mean, in the case of that great documentary they made about OJ, for example, Made in America, the more you learn about this, the person and the society that he lives in. And that he has grown in, and taken shape and form. And I think, we're all a product of that, in a way. So it's endlessly fascinating. It's also about money. It's about race. It's about all these things that have just, pervaded our election, in some ways, or as a big element. And I thought that the handling of that was it was done with nuance. And humor and intelligence. And so they were inspired by the original, obviously, BBC series, which I didn't see, but which I hear is terrific. But also they were inspired by different documentaries, one being The Staircase, which is a fantastic documentary. And I watched that. And, the more you know, the more you don't know. And that's what's interesting about it. And I think that's why it's much more than a whodunit. It's what happens to all these people and the cost of that. There's a cost to everything. If you visit someone in a hospital and you see a soldier and you see he's lost his arms and his legs, then you start to realize, like, wow, this is not an abstract thing. This is a real thing. This person's life will never be the same. And so you have a bigger responsibility if you're sending that person, into war. Some people don't agree with that. Some people think you shouldn't know too much about it. But anyway, I find that really interesting.
Now, the whodunit aspect of the story, it sort of remains ambiguous, throughout. We never learned for certain who committed the crime. Did you ever personally develop an opinion as you were making the series, like, of guilt or innocence, or who done it, or did you have like a?
I tried to keep, be being in the moment, you know, and obviously his job was to create doubt, you know, with the jury. And but he sees that a lot of things were just, you know, not investigated and not, you know, and sometimes everything points in one direction and it's the truth. And sometimes everything points in one direction and maybe it isn't. But I tried not to get too ahead of it, but to stay in that situation, you know, and knowing that, because I think they don't really know, you know, that they say, well, maybe it is possible, but still, here's my job. And, you know, do they have the proof of it or not? But I think, you know, certainly there's something between them, that he has some kind of feeling that he was, you know, in the wrong place at the wrong time. Yes, the guy has violence inside of him, but so does most people. So do most people, at least men.
It's an interesting thing, this was its own self-contained story. But since the series has ended, there has been some talk and speculation about whether the series could come back, maybe with a different story and different characters. There are some anthologies on TV right now that do that tell different stories, and a lot of them bring back a lot of the same actors. So if the opportunity ever came to team back up with this group of creative people for another story on of the same type in a sense, would you be interested in that sort of thing?
Yeah, I mean, I think the character of John Stone was a great character. It's I wonder what happens to him afterwards. Does he become much more successful or not? I don't know. But if Richard or Steve are interested in that, and I know HBO was, it would have to be the same quality of the writing that they did on this. And obviously it's got to be something that fascinates both of them or one of them, to investigate it. I mean, Richard obviously has spent his life writing about, cops and the criminal justice system. I mean, Clockers could have been 6 hours, easily. The book was so rich, the Whites that he just wrote, and so yes, I would consider it, if those people are, or one of those two people are involved.
The series is very detailed about the day-to-day of the criminal justice system, and it's very subtle and very nuanced. But it does eventually lead to a really emotional moment for your character. The closing argument he gives on Naz's behalf, which itself is also very subtle, but also very emotional. What was that scene like to play?
Well, I knew what was going to come at the end of it, so. I mean, basically, I approached it as a guy who, he doesn't really want to be in that situation, and, and I tried not to get ahead of it. I just tried to put myself in the situation that he was in, and I had to do it, for myself, and I had to do it for all the other actors. But once again, the material was strong, and, I felt like I was ready. I had done the whole 8 months before, shooting, and I tried to keep it fresh and not, not control it too much. Let it, sort of take me and try to communicate. But yeah, it was what you see. So if you feel that. But I had to do it again, a lot for the people when you're off camera, and especially for Riz. It's a privilege when you get to work on something like that. So you really want to do it justice, and you want to keep it, within you don't want to do too much, too little, whatever. But I try to do my work and then just forget about it. I told him, you better get ready because I don't want to do it a million times. So I think it's one of my early takes.
And in addition to acting, you're also a writer and director yourself. How does that influence your work as an actor, or how you approach a set or a project, or does it affect it?
It affects me that that I'm prepared and I'm ready to go, and that I try to understand the sensibility of the writer or the director, and I try to be there for them. I also sometimes have to challenge them at other times, say, hey, this seems not right for me, or try to be able to contribute physically in the staging of a scene a lot of times without changing the words, find a physical life and independent sort of activity to where the scene is. Because sometimes you're doing something and you can have something else that you're doing, and it can relax you, and takes you away from looking at the person all the time. So I think it's helped me as an actor. At first, when I first directed a movie many years ago, Mac, I felt so bad going back to work because I really felt bad for the director because he had all this pressure on him. And then I realized, okay, I have to still do my job and everything like that. But I definitely think I know what it is to sit in an editing room, which I am now. And so I'm aware of the whole process, more. But still, when you're an actor, you have to do your job, and sometimes you have to get in a playful, childlike space, depending on what you're doing. So, but it is helpful.
The project you're working on now is quite a bit different from the night of. It's you're spinning off the character from your character from the Big Lebowski, Jesus Quintana, into a kind of spin-off film, Going Places, which is also inspired by a French film from 1974. How did those unique ideas?
How did they meet? Well, it didn't start as that idea. I'll tell you that. The original movie was a movie that really kind of blew my mind. And then I saw a lot of this guy's movies. It's a Bertrand Blier. Get Out Your Handkerchiefs, Too Beautiful for You, Menage, Buffet Freud. I really loved the guy's sensibility. I thought he was really irreverent, and he was onto something. And these movies they're about freedom. Movies really are about freedom. And so a friend of mine reminded me of a movie. There's something he did. I was doing another movie, and then I rewatched it with my wife, and she thought it was funny. I was surprised. And then I saw that there was a novel, and I read the novel. And I asked Blier, I said, would you ever think about letting someone reimagine it? And maybe with older guys who were in stunted adolescence, like the Big Lebowski, for example. And he thought it was an interesting idea, and he was inspired by American road movies when he wrote this book. So it had this weird connection. And even Joel and Ethan, when I had done the Big Lebowski, they were inspired by something they saw me in a play. Anyway, the guy's name is Jean-Claude. So I called him JC when I was doing the adaptation. And then we did a reading of it, and I was like, I don't know how I will approach this. I couldn't figure out what I wanted to do. And then I started thinking about this play I had done, and I thought about the Big Lebowski, and I thought, oh, this could work. And then I tried it, and it was perfect in a way, because if you're going to take a character from another movie, you don't want to do the same thing that they did in that movie. You want to develop it, And I knew from my theater work that there was legs to this kind of a character. There was complexity and humor. So then I showed it to Joel and Ethan, and they thought it was a great idea because it was his own thing. And they thought the combination was very fresh. So it's a very strange, long road from 1976 when I saw it, when I was a teenager, to this, versus some play I did that inspired them to do that. It's this connection. So, there's no rules in how you get an idea. It just came to me. I was like, let me try it. And that's what I do when I rehearse. And I just seemed like, wow, this really is great. And then I had to, negotiate and everything. It was much more complicated, the legal end versus what it is. But I think it's it's a really fun movie, and it's a movie about one thing that's, about people who don't grow up. They're like, we all would like to live this way, but we can't really. But I think we like to see that, and I think movies that are like that, sometimes younger people see older people, acting that way, and they're like, wow, and that's the kind of charm of that, in a way. So it's coming along really nicely, but it's like a human comedy, about freedom, sexual freedom, and other things.
Well, I want to wish you the best of luck on that, and congratulations on the night of. And knock on wood, if going places goes places. Maybe keep in your mind what other milieu you might be able to put John Stone in yourself. You might want to spin off that character at some point in the future.
All right. Well, thank you. It's been a pleasure speaking with you.
It was a pleasure talking to you too.
Okay. All right. Have a great day. Thank you. Bye bye.